I found Patricia's note taped to my garage door at 6:30 on a Friday morning in January, when the temperature in Columbus, Ohio had dropped to -8 degrees, and my electric car sat in the driveway with barely enough charge to make it to work. The note, printed on official Meadowbrook Hills HOA letterhead, informed me that my Level 2 battery charger had been confiscated for violating community aesthetic guidelines, and that I had 72 hours to appeal the decision at the next board meeting. My name is Henry Vaughn, and I had lived in this cookie-cutter subdivision for 3 years without major incident. Sure, Patricia Norton, the HOA president, had sent me passive-aggressive reminders about my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day. And yes, she had threatened me with fines when my grass reached 3.2 inches instead of the mandated 3 inches exactly. But stealing my property during a polar vortex that had the entire Midwest in a deep freeze was a new level of insanity, even for her. I stood there in my driveway, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a thin jacket I had grabbed on my way out, staring at the empty spot where my charger should have been. The cold bit through the fabric and made my eyes water. My Tesla Model 3 sat there with 18% battery, which might get me to the office and back if I drove like a grandmother and prayed the heating system did not drain too much power. The charger, a $600 piece of equipment I had installed 6 months ago with proper permits from the city, had been mounted to the side of my garage. Now there were just holes in the siding where the bolts had been, and scrape marks where someone had pried it off with what looked like a crowbar. I yanked out my phone with numb fingers and called Patricia's number. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. I tried the HOA office line next, but that just rang and rang. The office did not open until 9 on weekdays, and this was a Friday, which meant Patricia probably would not be there until 10 or later, because she liked to get her nails done first thing every Friday morning at that place over on Henderson Road. My next call was to the police non-emergency line. A bored-sounding dispatcher took my information and told me an officer would come by sometime that day to take a report. She did not sound optimistic about my chances of getting the charger back quickly, and when I explained it was HOA-related, I could practically hear her eyes rolling through the phone. "Sir, if this is a civil dispute with your homeowners association, you might want to contact a lawyer instead," she said. "They stole my property," I said. "That's theft, not a civil dispute." "We'll send someone out," she repeated, and then the line went dead. I went back inside my house, which was at least warm, and made coffee while I figured out my next move. My job as a software engineer at a cybersecurity firm downtown was flexible, but I still needed to be there for a morning meeting at 9. I could try to make it on the charge I had, but if the battery died on the way back, I would be stranded. The temperature was not supposed to climb above 0 until Sunday. My neighbor across the street, Mike Daniels, knocked on my door 20 minutes later. He was a retired mailman in his 60s who had lived in Meadowbrook Hills since the subdivision was built 15 years ago. He knew where all the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking, and he had warned me about Patricia when I first moved in. "Saw you outside earlier," Mike said, stamping snow off his boots on my porch. "Patricia got you too, huh?" "What do you mean too?" I asked. Mike came inside and gratefully accepted a cup of coffee. His face was red from the cold, and his breath still came out in visible puffs, even in my warm house. "She's been on a tear this week," he explained. "Wednesday night, she and her little posse went around with that stupid list of violations she's been compiling. Doug Martinez got cited for his holiday decorations still being up. Jenny Chen got a fine for parking her work van in her driveway overnight, And apparently, your charger violated the new equipment visibility rule she pushed through at the December meeting." "What December meeting?" I demanded. "I never got notice of a December meeting." Mike gave me a look that said I should know better. "She sent an email at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve, scheduling it for December 26th at 7 in the morning. Only her cronies showed up. They passed a bunch of new rules, including one about electrical equipment being visible from common areas." I felt my blood pressure rising. That's not even legal. Ohio law requires 10 days notice for HOA meetings. You think Patricia cares about Ohio law? Mike laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She thinks she is the law around here. Been getting worse ever since her divorce went through last year. I think she's taking out her anger on the rest of us." I checked my email and found the meeting notice buried in my spam folder, exactly where Gmail had put it because it came from an unfamiliar address at an odd time. Even if I had seen it, I would not have gone to a meeting at 7 in the morning the day after Christmas. So what do I do? I asked Mike. "Well, you could lawyer up, but that'll cost you thousands and take months. You could try to work with her, which won't work because Patricia doesn't compromise. Or you could do what I did when she tried to fine me for my rose bushes being the wrong color." Mike's smile was downright wicked. "Fight back." "How did you fight back?" I documented everything. Every interaction, every violation notice, every fine. Then I filed a complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's office about HOA abuse. Took 6 months, but they sent someone to investigate. Patricia had to back down on about half her pet rules because they violated state law. She's hated me ever since, but she also leaves me alone now. I liked the sound of that. I spent the next hour taking photos of where my charger had been, documenting the damage to my siding, and screenshotting every email Patricia had ever sent me. Then, I printed out the Ohio revised code sections about HOA governance and meeting requirements. By the time the police officer arrived at 10:30, I had a folder full of documentation ready to go. Officer Williams was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. He took photos, examined the damage, and wrote up a report while I explained the situation. When I showed him Patricia's note, his expression shifted from bored to interested. "So let me get this straight," he said. "She admitted in writing to taking your property." "That's what confiscation means, right?" "Yeah, but HOAs don't have the legal authority to confiscate property. They can fine you, they can put liens on your house if you don't pay, but they can't just take your stuff." He made some more notes. "This might actually be theft. Let me talk to my supervisor." He went back to his patrol car for a few minutes, and when he returned, he had a different energy about him. "My supervisor wants to talk to your HOA president," Officer Williams said. "You have her contact information." I gave him Patricia's phone number and address. She lived in the biggest house in the subdivision, a sprawling 2-story monstrosity at the end of Maple Grove Lane that she had gotten in the divorce. Her ex-husband, from what I had heard through the neighborhood gossip chain, had been so eager to escape her that he had basically given her everything and fled to Arizona. "We'll go have a conversation with her," Officer Williams said. "In the meantime, if you find out where your charger is, don't try to take it back yourself. Call us first. I don't want this turning into a he said, she said situation." After the officer left, I faced the immediate problem of getting to work. I decided to risk it, and made the drive downtown on my remaining charge, keeping the heat at a minimal 62 degrees and driving like every cop in Columbus was watching me. The battery indicator ticked down steadily, and by the time I pulled into the parking garage at my office building, I was at 6%. My coworker, Brandon, found me staring at my phone in the break room during lunch, researching Ohio HOA laws. You look stressed, he observed, grabbing a sandwich from the fridge. I explained the situation, and Brandon, who was the kind of guy who got invested in other people's problems like they were his own, immediately pulled out his laptop. Okay, so I'm looking at the Ohio Revised Code here, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Section 3718.03 says HOAs have to follow their own bylaws and the law. They can't just make up rules on the fly. And Section 53:12.14 says they need proper notice for meetings. If she only sent an email at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve for a meeting the next day, that's definitely not proper notice. That's what Mike said. Who's Mike? My neighbor. He's dealt with Patricia before. Brandon kept typing. Okay, this is interesting. There's case law from a situation in Cleveland a few years ago where an HOA president was actually charged with theft for confiscating a resident's property. The resident won, got their stuff back, and the HOA had to pay damages. He turned his laptop to show me the screen. You might actually have a criminal case here, not just a civil one. That made me feel slightly better, but it did not solve my immediate problem. I had no way to charge my car, and the temperatures were not going to warm up for days. I could not afford to miss work, and I definitely could not afford to buy a new charger when I had a perfectly good one that had been stolen. At 3 p.m., Officer Williams called me back. Mr. Vaughn, this is Officer Williams from this morning. I went to speak with Miss Norton, and she confirmed she has your charger. She's claiming it was confiscated according to HOA rules and that she has the authority to do so. I explained to her that's not how the law works, but she was pretty insistent. My supervisor is reviewing the case, but it's looking like we might file theft charges. Can I get my charger back? I asked. That's the thing. She says it's being stored in the HOA office, but she won't give it back until after your appeal hearing. I told her that's not legal, but short of getting a warrant, I can't force her to hand it over right now. The warrant will take a day or two because it's not an emergency situation. I wanted to scream. Officer, I need that charger. My car is almost dead and it's -8 degrees outside. This is affecting my ability to work. I understand, sir. The best I can do is expedite this. I'll talk to my supervisor again and see if we can get a warrant by Monday. In the meantime, is there somewhere else you can charge your vehicle? I thought about it. There were public charging stations around Columbus, but most of them were level 2 chargers that would take hours, and with the cold, they would be even slower. The Tesla supercharger stations were fast, but the nearest one was 15 miles away, which I could not reach on 6% battery. I'll figure something out, I said, though I had no idea how. After work, I convinced Brandon to give me a ride to the Tesla supercharger station in his gas-guzzling pickup truck. We used a tow strap to pull my car behind his truck, which was probably illegal and definitely dangerous, but I was desperate. The charging station was crowded with other electric vehicle owners who had the same idea, and I had to wait 40 minutes for an open spot. The charging took another hour because the cold weather slowed everything down, and by the time Brandon drove me back home, it was nearly 8 p.m. Thanks, man, I said as I pulled into my driveway with a full battery. I owe you dinner. Just let me know how this turns out, Brandon said. I want to hear about Patricia getting arrested. I did not think it would go that far, but I appreciated his optimism. Saturday morning, I woke up to find another note on my door. This one informed me that I was being fined $500 for the damage to my garage siding, which Patricia claimed was an aesthetic violation. The irony of being fined for damage that she had caused by stealing my charger was not lost on me. Mike came over mid-morning with coffee and donuts from the place on the corner. "Saw you got another love letter from Patricia," he said. "She's fining me for the damage she caused." Mike whistled. "That's bold even for her. You should come to the board meeting on Monday. It's supposed to be a regular session, not your appeal hearing, but Patricia will be there and so will the rest of the board. Might be a good time to confront her in front of witnesses." "What time?" 7 p.m. at the community center. Mike bit into a donut. "Fair warning, though. Patricia stacks these meetings with her supporters. There's Brenda Cooper, who's the treasurer and basically Patricia's yes woman. Then there's Linda Hayes, who's the secretary and does whatever Patricia tells her to do. The only reasonable person on the board is Tom Fletcher, but he's outvoted 3-1 on everything. I decided to spend the weekend preparing. I printed out more documentation, highlighted the relevant sections of Ohio law, and even prepared a short statement to read at the meeting. I also charged my car to 100%, just in case, and researched lawyers who specialized in HOA disputes. The consultations were not cheap, but if this went to court, I wanted to be ready. Sunday evening, Mike called me. "You're going to love this," he said. "I just drove past the community center, and Patricia's car is dead in the parking lot. She must have left her lights on or something, because there's a tow truck there right now." "Good," I said, feeling a petty sense of satisfaction. "Maybe karma is real." "Oh, it gets better. The tow truck left without her car because she couldn't pay the fee. She was screaming at the driver when I went by." Monday morning arrived with slightly warmer temperatures, though the forecast still showed a high of 10 degrees. I went to work with a full charge, spent the day distracted by thoughts of the evening's board meeting, and left the office at 5:30 to make sure I had plenty of time. The Meadowbrook Hills Community Center was a small building near the entrance to the subdivision, with a meeting room that could hold maybe 40 people. When I arrived at 6:45, there were already a dozen cars in the parking lot. I recognized Patricia's white Lexus SUV sitting in the far corner near the street, away from the other vehicles. Inside, the meeting room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Patricia was already there, looking severe in a black pantsuit with her blonde hair pulled back so tight it probably hurt. Brenda Cooper, a heavy-set woman in her 50s with a permanent scowl, sat to Patricia's right. Linda Hayes, thin and nervous-looking, sat to Patricia's left. Tom Fletcher, a tired-looking man in his 40s who ran a plumbing business, sat at the far end of the table and gave me a sympathetic nod when I walked in. Mike was already seated in the third row, and he waved me over. A few other neighbors were scattered around the room, most of them looking like they would rather be anywhere else. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m., her voice sharp and authoritative. "Welcome to the January board meeting of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association," she began. "We have several items on the agenda tonight, including a review of the December minutes, a financial report, and a discussion of ongoing violations. If anyone has any additional items to add, please raise your hand now." I raised my hand. Patricia's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Yes, Mr. Vaughn. I'd like to discuss the theft of my property by this board," I said clearly, making sure everyone in the room could hear me. The room got very quiet. Brenda's scowl deepened. Linda looked like she wanted to disappear under the table, and Tom sat up straighter with interest. "It's not theft," Patricia said coldly. "Your equipment was confiscated according to HOA rules that were properly passed at the December meeting." The December meeting that violated Ohio law by not providing proper notice. I stood up, holding my folder of documentation. The December meeting that was announced at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve for 7 a.m. the next morning. That's not 10 days' notice, Miss Norton. That's not even 2 days' notice. The notice was sent electronically, which is permitted under our bylaws, Patricia shot back. Your bylaws don't override state law, I said. And even if they did, you still need reasonable notice. No one can reasonably be expected to check their email at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve and attend a meeting at 7 a.m. the next morning. Tom Fletcher cleared his throat. Actually, Patricia, he's got a point. I missed that meeting because I didn't see the notice until the day after. I thought it was odd that we were having a meeting on December 26th. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel. The meeting was properly noticed according to our interpretation of the bylaws. Your interpretation is wrong, I said. And regardless of whether the meeting was properly noticed, the HOA doesn't have the authority to confiscate personal property. You can fine me, you can put a lien on my house if I don't pay the fine, but you can't take my stuff. That's theft under Ohio law. How dare you accuse this board of theft? Brenda burst out, her face turning red. We're volunteers trying to maintain property values in this community. Then give me back my charger, I said simply. You can get it back after your appeal hearing, Patricia said. Which hasn't been scheduled yet because we're still reviewing the violation. When will it be scheduled? When we're ready. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I have confirmation from the Columbus Police Department that they're seeking a warrant for the return of my property. Officer Williams spoke with you on Friday, Miss Norton, and you admitted to having my charger. He informed you that confiscation without legal authority constitutes theft. The warrant should be issued by tomorrow morning. The room erupted in murmurs. Several neighbors who had been sitting quietly suddenly looked very interested. Mike was grinning from ear to ear. Patricia's face had gone pale, then red. This is ridiculous. We're trying to enforce reasonable rules to maintain a nice community, and you're treating us like criminals. You stole my $600 charger during a polar vortex, I said. That's not rule enforcement. That's theft, and it's also incredibly dangerous. What if someone had a medical emergency and couldn't leave because their car was dead? What if I had lost my job because I couldn't get to work? You should have thought about that before violating the rules, Patricia snapped. Tom Fletcher stood up. Okay, I've heard enough. Patricia, I've gone along with a lot of your ideas because I thought you had the community's best interests at heart, but this is too far. We need to give Mr. Vaughn his charger back immediately, and we need to rescind any rules that were passed at that December meeting. You don't have the authority to make that decision, Patricia said. Actually, any board member can call for a vote, Tom said. I'm calling for a vote to return Mr. Vaughn's property and rescind the December rules. Seconded, said a voice from the audience. It was Jenny Chen, the woman who had gotten fined for parking her work van in her driveway. Patricia looked furious. That's not how this works. The vote has to come from the board. Then I'll second it, Tom said. All in favor, Tom raised his hand. Linda Hayes hesitated, looked at Patricia, then slowly raised her hand too. Brenda kept her hand down, glaring at everyone. That's 2 votes in favor, Tom said. The motion passes. Patricia, where's the charger? This is outrageous, Patricia said. I'm the president of this board and I will not be undermined like this. You're not being undermined, Tom said. You're being overruled because you broke the law. Now, where's the charger? Patricia stood up, gathering her papers. It's in the storage room in the back of this building, but I'm not getting it. You want it. Get it yourself. She stormed out of the meeting room with Brenda following close behind. Linda stayed seated, looking miserable. Tom turned to me. Mr. Vaughn, I apologize on behalf of this board. Let's go get your charger. The storage room was a cluttered mess of old holiday decorations, lawn care equipment, and random junk that had accumulated over the years. My charger was sitting on a metal shelf in the back, the cord coiled neatly beside it. I checked it over carefully and found some scratches from where it had been pried off my garage, but otherwise it looked intact. "I'm really sorry about this," Tom said as we carried it out to my car. "Patricia's been getting more extreme over the past year. I've tried to rein her in, but Brenda always backs her up and Linda's too scared to vote against her most of the time." "Why did Linda vote with you tonight?" Tom smiled slightly. "Because her brother's a lawyer, and she knows exactly how much trouble the HOA could be in if this went to court. She might be scared of Patricia, but she's more scared of being personally liable in a lawsuit." We loaded the charger into my trunk, and I shook Tom's hand. Several neighbors came over to congratulate me and share their own stories of Patricia's tyranny. Doug Martinez told me about how she had threatened to fine him $100 a day until he took down his Three Kings Day decorations. Jenny Chen showed me photos of the citation she had gotten for her work van, even though she needed it for her plumbing business, and there was nothing in the original HOA bylaws prohibiting commercial vehicles. "We should file a complaint with the state," Jenny said. "If enough of us do it, maybe they'll investigate." "Mike already filed one," I said. "Maybe if more of us add to it, they'll take action faster." Mike joined our little group. "I've got the contact information for the Attorney General's office. Anyone who wants to file a complaint, I'll help you put it together. Between all of us, we should have plenty of documentation of Patricia's violations." I drove home that night feeling vindicated, but also exhausted. It was after 9 p.m., and all I wanted to do was reinstall my charger and collapse into bed. The reinstallation took about an hour because I had to use new mounting bolts and patch the damaged siding, but by 10:30, the charger was back in place and my car was plugged in. Tuesday morning, I was woken up at 7 by a phone call from Officer Williams. "Mr. Vaughn, this is Officer Williams. I wanted to let you know that we secured a warrant yesterday evening to retrieve your charger, but it sounds like you already got it back." "The HOA board voted to return it last night," I explained. "Good, that's good. However, my supervisor still wants to pursue charges because the initial confiscation was illegal. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to court?" "Absolutely." "Great. We'll be in touch." "Oh, and one more thing. Miss Norton called the station this morning to file a complaint about you for slander and defamation." My supervisor explained to her that truth is a defense to both of those things, and that if she continues to file frivolous complaints, she could be charged with misuse of emergency services. I laughed. I could not help it. She's really doubling down on this, isn't she? "Some people don't know when to quit," Officer Williams said. "Have a good day, sir." I went to work that day in a great mood, my car fully charged and the charger safely back where it belonged. Brandon wanted to hear every detail of the board meeting, and by lunch, half the office knew the story. Someone suggested I write it up and post it online, but I figured I should wait until any legal proceedings were finished. Wednesday evening, Tom Fletcher called me. "Henry, it's Tom from the HOA board. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Patricia's calling an emergency board meeting for Friday night. She's trying to vote me off the board and replace me with someone who'll support her. Can she do that? Only if she gets the votes. She's been calling around trying to get support, but a lot of people are pretty angry with her right now. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to come to the meeting and speak on my behalf." "Of course," I said. "What time?" 7 p.m. again, same place. I spent the next 2 days rallying support. Mike helped me organize a phone tree to contact everyone in the neighborhood, who had been affected by Patricia's rules. Jenny Chen created a Facebook group for Meadowbrook Hills residents to discuss HOA issues, and it quickly filled up with complaints about Patricia. By Friday evening, we had 24 people committed to attending the meeting. The community center was packed when I arrived at 6:30. Every chair was filled and people were standing along the walls. Patricia sat at the board table with Brenda, both of them looking grim. Linda Hayes was there too, but she kept her eyes down. Tom Fletcher arrived a few minutes later and took his seat, giving me a nod. Patricia called the meeting to order, but her voice lacked its usual authority. She had to raise it to be heard over the murmuring crowd. This emergency meeting has been called to address issues with board member Tom Fletcher's conduct, she began. Specifically, his undermining of board decisions and his failure to support community standards. "That's garbage," someone called out from the back. I recognized Doug Martinez's voice. Patricia's jaw clenched. "Mr. Martinez, you're out of order. Only board members can speak unless recognized." "Then I'd like to be recognized," Doug said, standing up. "I want to speak about how you fined me $200 for having decorations up for a religious holiday that my family celebrates. That's religious discrimination, Miss Norton." "The rules apply to everyone equally," Patricia said. "The rules are ridiculous." Another voice, this time from Jenny Chen. "I got fined for parking my work van in my own driveway. I need that van to run my business. Where else am I supposed to park it?" The meeting devolved from there. Person after person stood up to share their grievances about Patricia's enforcement of the rules. The fines for grass being a quarter-inch too tall. The citations for holiday decorations lasting 1 day too long. The complaints about garage doors being open for more than an hour at a time. The demands that everyone paint their front doors specific approved colors. Patricia tried to maintain control, but she was outnumbered and outmatched. Even Brenda looked uncomfortable as the complaints piled up. Finally, Tom Fletcher stood up. "I'd like to call for a vote of no confidence in President Patricia Norton," he said clearly. "Based on her violations of state law, her abuse of authority, and her pattern of harassment toward community members, I move that she be removed from her position as HOA president." The room erupted in applause and shouts of support. Patricia looked stunned. "You can't do that," she said. "That's not on the agenda." "Actually, any board member can call for a vote of no confidence at any meeting," Tom said. "It's in the bylaws that you like to cite so much. Do I have a second?" "Seconded," Linda Hayes said quietly. Patricia turned to stare at her. "Linda, you can't be serious." "I'm sorry, Patricia, but Tom's right. We've gone too far." Linda's voice was shaking, but she kept talking. "My brother looked at everything we've done in the past 6 months, and he says we could all be personally liable in lawsuits. I can't afford that. I won't risk my house and my retirement because you have a vendetta against the neighborhood." "All in favor of removing Patricia Norton as HOA president?" Tom asked. Tom and Linda raised their hands. Brenda kept hers down, still glaring at everyone. "The vote passes 2-1, Tom said. "Patricia, you're no longer the president of this board. We'll need to hold elections for a new president at the next regular meeting." Patricia stood up slowly, her face white with rage. "You'll regret this, all of you. I'll sue the HOA. I'll sue every single person in this room. You can't treat me like this." "Actually, we just did," Mike called out from the audience, and several people laughed. Patricia grabbed her things and stormed out for the second time in a week. Brenda followed her, though she paused at the door to say, "I'm resigning from the board, effective immediately." "You people deserve whatever chaos you get." After they left, the meeting turned into more of a celebration. Tom Fletcher was elected temporary president by unanimous vote, with Linda Hayes agreeing to stay on as secretary. The board opened nominations for the 2 empty positions, and by the end of the night, Jenny Chen and Doug Martinez had volunteered to join. "First order of business," Tom said, "is to review every rule that Patricia implemented in the past year and rescind anything that violates state law or common sense. Second order of business is to refund any fines that were improperly assessed. Third order of business is to send a formal apology to everyone who was harassed or threatened by the previous board leadership." The applause was thunderous. I went home that night feeling like justice had been served, but I knew it was not over yet. Patricia was the type to hold a grudge, and her threat to sue was probably not empty. Sure enough, on Monday morning, I received a certified letter informing me that Patricia Norton had filed a lawsuit against me personally for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I called the lawyer I had consulted the previous week, a sharp woman named Rachel Foster who specialized in HOA disputes and civil litigation. "Don't worry about this," Rachel said after reviewing the lawsuit. "It's a slap suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to intimidate you into silence. Ohio has anti-slap laws that protect people who speak out on matters of public concern. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and we'll probably countersue for malicious prosecution." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked. "Probably less than you think. If we win the anti-slap motion, which I'm confident we will, she'll have to pay your legal fees. And if we countersue and win, you might actually come out ahead financially." Rachel filed the motion to dismiss the following week, and she also helped me file a formal complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's office about Patricia's conduct as HOA president. The complaint detailed every violation of state law, every improperly assessed fine, and every incident of harassment and intimidation. Meanwhile, the new HOA board got to work cleaning up Patricia's mess. They rescinded all the rules from the December meeting, refunded over $10,000 in improper fines to various residents, and sent formal apologies to everyone who had been targeted. They also amended the bylaws to require more transparency and accountability, including mandatory recordings of all board meetings, and a requirement that any rule changes be approved by a vote of the full membership, not just the board. Patricia's lawsuit was dismissed in March with the judge calling it frivolous and without merit. The judge also ordered Patricia to pay my legal fees, which came to about $8,000. Rachel filed a countersuit for malicious prosecution, seeking $25,000 in damages. But the real blow to Patricia came in April, when the Ohio Attorney General's office completed their investigation and issued a scathing report about her conduct as HOA president. The report found that she had violated multiple sections of the Ohio Revised Code, improperly assessed fines, failed to provide proper notice for meetings, and exceeded her authority as president. The report also recommended that any residents who had been financially harmed by her actions could file claims for restitution. The Columbus Police Department filed charges in May. Patricia Norton was charged with theft for confiscating my charger, abuse of authority for her pattern of improper fines and harassment, and fraud for misrepresenting the HOA's authority to various residents. She was arrested on a Tuesday morning, and Mike happened to be outside when the police car pulled up to her house. "You should have seen her face," Mike told me later that day. She tried to argue with the officers, telling them she had immunity as an HOA president. They just cuffed her and put her in the car. Brenda Cooper was there too, and she got arrested as well for conspiracy and aiding and abetting. The criminal trial took place in August. I testified about the Charger incident, and several other residents testified about their experiences with Patricia's reign of terror over the HOA. The prosecutor presented evidence of multiple violations of state law, and Rachel Foster testified as an expert witness about HOA governance and legal standards. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she was just a volunteer trying to maintain community standards, and that any violations were honest mistakes. The jury did not buy it. After 3 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, they found Patricia guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered her to pay restitution to every resident she had improperly fined. The total restitution amount came to over $30,000. Brenda Cooper got 3 months in jail and 2 years of probation for her role in supporting Patricia's schemes. My countersuit for malicious prosecution was settled out of court in September. Patricia agreed to pay me $15,000, which more than covered my legal fees and compensated me for the time and stress of dealing with her lawsuit. I used part of the money to upgrade my electric charger to a faster model and donated the rest to a legal aid fund that helped homeowners fight abusive HOAs. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA, under Tom Fletcher's leadership, became a model for how community associations should operate. They focused on actual community improvement projects like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, rather than nitpicking every minor violation. Property values in the subdivision actually increased after Patricia's removal, because people wanted to live in a community that was well managed but not oppressive. Patricia Norton moved out of Meadowbrook Hills in November, selling her house at a loss to get away from the neighborhood that had turned against her. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to a condo in another part of Columbus, one without an HOA. The irony was not lost on anyone. Mike Daniels became something of a neighborhood hero, and he was elected to the HOA board in the next election cycle. Jenny Chen's plumbing business thrived, and she never got another citation for her work van. Doug Martinez put up the most elaborate Three Kings Day display the following January, and no one said a word about it except to compliment how beautiful it looked. As for me, I kept living in my house on Maple Grove Lane, charging my electric car every night without incident, and enjoying the peace and quiet of a neighborhood that had finally learned to mind its own business. The cold snap that had started this whole mess seemed like a distant memory. Though I would never forget the morning I found that note on my garage door and realized just how far some people would go to exert control over their neighbors. The experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, always read your HOA bylaws and know your rights under state law. Second, document everything when dealing with unreasonable authority figures. Third, stand up for yourself even when it seems easier to give in, because bullies like Patricia only stop when people refuse to be intimidated. And fourth, community is about supporting each other and building each other up, not tearing each other down over minor rule violations. I kept in touch with Officer Williams, who told me that the case had become something of a teaching example at the police department about how HOA disputes could escalate into criminal matters. He said several other residents in Columbus had used my case as precedent to push back against abusive HOA boards, and the city had even created a task force to investigate complaints about HOA governance. Rachel Foster, my lawyer, asked if she could use my case in a presentation she was giving at a legal conference about HOA law and homeowner rights. I agreed, and she later told me that my case had inspired several other attorneys to take on HOA abuse cases that they might have otherwise turned down. The local news picked up the story after Patricia's conviction, and I did a brief interview with a reporter from the Columbus Dispatch. The article focused on the dangers of unchecked HOA authority and the importance of transparency and accountability in community governance. It generated a lot of discussion online, with people sharing their own horror stories about abusive HOAs and debating how much power these organizations should have. Some people thought I had gone too far by pursuing criminal charges and a lawsuit against Patricia. They argued that she was just a volunteer trying to do her best and that mistakes happen. But most people understood that what Patricia had done went far beyond honest mistakes. She had deliberately violated state law, stolen property, and harassed residents because she enjoyed the power and control it gave her. That kind of behavior needed to have consequences, both to punish her and to deter others who might be tempted to abuse their authority. The Friday after Patricia's sentencing, the new HOA board threw a neighborhood block party to celebrate the community coming together. Tom Fletcher gave a speech about the importance of treating neighbors with respect and kindness, and about how rules should serve the community rather than the other way around. Mike told stories about the old days of the HOA, before Patricia had taken over, when the board meetings were friendly gatherings where people actually enjoyed volunteering their time. I stood in my driveway that evening, watching kids play in the street while adults chatted and laughed around grills and coolers. My electric car sat in the driveway with the charger cable plugged in, exactly where it belonged, and no one gave it a second glance. The temperature had finally broken above freezing for the first time in weeks, and there was a feeling of spring in the air even though it was still winter. Jenny Chen came over with a plate of food and a beer. "You know, you're kind of a legend around here now. The guy who took down the evil HOA president," I laughed. "I just wanted my charger back." "Yeah, but you didn't stop there. You could have just taken it and moved on, but you made sure she faced consequences. A lot of people wouldn't have had the guts to do that." "I had a lot of help," I said, gesturing to Mike and the others. "If people hadn't backed me up, Patricia would have buried me in legal fees and intimidation." "That's what community is supposed to be about," Jenny said. "Having each other's backs." Patricia forgot that. She thought being HOA president made her some kind of dictator. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party unfold around us. "Hey, Henry," Jenny said. "Thanks for not giving up. You made this neighborhood better." I raised my beer in a toast. "To neighbors who stand up for each other." "To neighbors who stand up for each other," she echoed, clinking her bottle against mine. The party went late into the evening, with people lingering even after the food was gone and the sun had set. There was music playing from someone's portable speaker, and a group of kids had organized an impromptu soccer game under the street lights. It felt like a real neighborhood, the kind of place where people actually knew and cared about each other, rather than just existing in proximity while an authoritarian HOA board dictated their every move. When I finally went inside around 10 p.m., exhausted but happy, I checked my email one last time. There was a message from the Ohio Attorney General's office, thanking me for my cooperation with their investigation and informing me that they were using the Meadowbrook Hills case as a model for new guidelines about HOA oversight and governance. They were also recommending legislative changes to give homeowners more protection against abusive HOA boards and to create clearer penalties for board members who violated state law. I felt a sense of pride reading that email. What had started as a simple dispute over a stolen battery charger had turned into something much bigger, something that might actually help other people who were trapped under the thumb of power-hungry HOA boards. Change was slow, especially when it came to bureaucratic systems like homeowners associations, but it was possible. Sometimes all it took was one person refusing to back down and others finding the courage to join them. I thought about Patricia Norton, sitting in a jail cell and facing years of probation and financial ruin, all because she had let power go to her head. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had clearly been unhappy in her personal life, going through a difficult divorce, and she had channeled that unhappiness into controlling and punishing her neighbors. If she had just focused on the actual responsibilities of being HOA president, maintaining common areas and organizing community events, she could have made a positive difference. Instead, she had become exactly the kind of petty tyrant that made people hate HOAs. But mostly, I did not feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. She had stolen from me during a dangerous cold snap, harassed and intimidated dozens of people, violated state law repeatedly, and then tried to sue me into silence when I fought back. She deserved everything that happened to her, and I hoped her punishment would serve as a warning to other would-be HOA dictators. I went to bed that night with my car charging safely in the driveway, my legal battles won, and my neighborhood transformed into the kind of place I actually wanted to live. The battery charger hummed quietly outside my window, a small but constant reminder that standing up for yourself was worth the trouble, even when it seemed easier to just give in. The next morning, I woke up to a bright Saturday with temperatures finally above freezing. The massive piles of snow that had accumulated during the cold snap were starting to melt, and there was a feeling of renewal in the air. I made coffee and went outside to check on my car and charger, a habit I had developed after the whole ordeal. Everything was exactly as it should be. The charger was securely mounted to my garage, the cable was plugged into my car, and the indicator light showed a full charge. I ran my hand over the scratches in the mounting bracket, the only remaining physical evidence of Patricia's theft, and decided to leave them there. They were a reminder of what I had been through and what I had overcome. Mike was outside getting his newspaper and he waved me over. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I have in months," I admitted. "Me too." It's amazing how much stress just disappears when you don't have to worry about getting a citation for every little thing. Mike grinned. "I let my grass grow to 4 inches yesterday. Felt like a rebel," I laughed. "Living dangerously." "Tom's planning to propose some changes to the bylaws at the next meeting," Mike said. "He wants to get rid of a lot of the really specific rules and replace them with general guidelines about maintaining properties. Basically, as long as you're not letting your house fall apart or creating actual nuisances, the HOA will leave you alone." Sounds perfect. He also wants to create a hardship exception process. So if someone's going through a tough time and can't keep up with maintenance for a while, they can apply for temporary relief instead of just getting hit with fines. Jenny suggested it after her dad got sick last year and she was traveling back and forth to Cleveland to take care of him. Patricia fined her for not mowing her lawn while she was dealing with a family emergency. I shook my head. Patricia really was something else. "She was a nightmare," Mike corrected. "But she's gone now and we're better off for it." We stood there in the weak winter sunlight, two neighbors who had become friends through adversity, enjoying the simple pleasure of a Saturday morning without fear of HOA citations. "You know what?" Mike said. "We should do something to commemorate this. What if we organized an annual neighborhood gathering? Not just a party, but like a real community day where we do volunteer projects together and just hang out. Build the kind of neighborhood spirit that Patricia tried to kill. I like that idea, I said. We could call it Meadowbrook Day or something. Perfect. I'll talk to Tom about it. As the weeks and months passed, life in Meadowbrook Hills settled into a comfortable routine. The new HOA board focused on the basics, maintaining the common areas and organizing community events without micromanaging everyone's lives. The neighborhood Facebook group that Jenny had created became a place where people shared recommendations, organized playdates for kids, and helped each other out with everything from borrowing tools to watching pets while neighbors were on vacation. The first annual Meadowbrook Day happened in May, and it was a huge success. We organized teams to plant flowers in the common areas, paint the community center, and clean up the playground. In the afternoon, there was a potluck picnic and games for the kids. Tom Fletcher gave a speech about community and cooperation, and someone suggested we create a time capsule to bury in the common area, filled with mementos from this new chapter in our neighborhood's history. I contributed a copy of the court documents from Patricia's conviction, along with a photo of my battery charger mounted safely on my garage. Mike added a printout of his complaint to the Attorney General's office. Jenny included one of the improper fine notices she had received for her work van. And Doug contributed a photo of his Three Kings Day decorations, so future generations will know what we went through, Tom said as we sealed the capsule and buried it near the playground. Patricia's house sold in June to a young couple with 2 small kids. They were friendly and excited to be in the neighborhood, and when they asked me about the HOA, I was honest with them about the history but assured them things were different now. We had some problems with the previous leadership, I said, but the new board is great. They focus on actual community improvement instead of nitpicking everyone to death. The husband laughed. That's good to hear. Our last neighborhood had an HOA president who tried to fine us because our kids' chalk drawings on the driveway were visible from the street. You'll fit right in here, I said. I ran into Brenda Cooper one day in late summer at the grocery store. She had been released from jail after serving her 3 months and was on probation. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing than she had been when she sat at the board table glaring at everyone who disagreed with Patricia. She saw me and looked like she wanted to run away, but I walked up to her. "Hi, Brenda," I said. "Henry." She could not quite meet my eyes. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Why did you go along with everything Patricia did? You must have known some of it was wrong." Brenda was quiet for a long moment. "I was lonely," she finally said. "My kids are grown and moved away. My husband works all the time. Patricia made me feel important, like I mattered. I knew she was going too far sometimes, but I told myself we were protecting property values and maintaining standards. I didn't want to admit we were just being bullies. You regret it, every day." Brenda's voice was thick with emotion. "I lost 3 months of my life in jail. I have a criminal record now. My husband is talking about divorce. And for what? Because I wanted to feel important by helping Patricia terrorize the neighborhood." I did not know what to say to that. Part of me felt vindicated by her obvious regret, but another part just felt sad that things had gone so far. "I hope you figure things out," I said finally. "People make mistakes. What matters is whether you learn from them." Brenda nodded, tears in her eyes, and we parted ways. I told Mike about the encounter later, and he was less forgiving than I had been. "She made her choices," he said. "Just like Patricia did. They both deserve what they got." "I know," I said, "but it's still sad. They could have used their energy to make the neighborhood better instead of worse." "That's the difference between people like you and people like them," Mike said. "You wanted to build something good. They just wanted power." As autumn arrived and the leaves began to turn, I reflected on everything that had happened since that frozen January morning when I had found Patricia's note on my garage door. So much had changed in such a short time. The neighborhood had been transformed from a place where people lived in fear of HOA violations to a real community where neighbors looked out for each other. Patricia and Brenda had gone from positions of power to convicted criminals. And I had gone from just another homeowner trying to get by to someone who had made a real difference in his community. The battery charger still hung on my garage wall, faithfully charging my car every night. Sometimes I would stand there in the driveway and remember that bitter cold morning, the rage and helplessness I had felt when I realized my property had been stolen. And then I would remember everything that came after: the support of my neighbors, the satisfaction of standing up to a bully, the vindication of seeing justice served. It had been worth it. Every stressful moment, every legal fee, every hour spent documenting violations and preparing for meetings and court appearances. It had all been worth it to transform my neighborhood into a place where people could live without fear, where rules served the community instead of oppressing it, and where ordinary people could stand up to those who abused power. On a cold December evening, almost a year after the battery charger incident, I stood in my driveway plugging in my car and noticed Tom Fletcher walking by. "Evening, Henry," he called out. "Hey, Tom, how are things?" "Good. Really good, actually. I was just thinking about how different things are compared to last year." He came over to chat. "Remember when we were all walking on eggshells, afraid to do anything that might catch Patricia's attention?" "I remember," I said. "I used to check the HOA website every day to see if there were new rules I needed to follow." Tom laughed. "I was the same way. Now the most stressful part of being HOA president is trying to organize the holiday party and making sure we don't run out of cookies. That's how it should be." "Hey, I wanted to ask you something," Tom said. "We're putting together a panel for a community forum about HOA governance. The city is organizing it after all the publicity from your case. Would you be willing to speak about your experience, really?" "Me?" "You're the face of standing up to HOA abuse," Tom said. "People want to hear your story. Plus, it might help other homeowners who are dealing with similar situations." I thought about it. Public speaking was not my favorite thing, but if my experience could help others, it seemed worth doing. "Sure," I said. "When is it?" "January 15th. At the main library downtown. There will be lawyers there, representatives from the Attorney General's office, and several other homeowners who have fought back against abusive HOAs. It's going to be a big deal." "Okay, I'll do it." Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "Thanks, Henry. You've already done so much for this neighborhood. You're a good man." After he left, I stood there in the cold evening air, looking at my house, my car, my battery charger. A year ago, I never could have imagined that a stolen charger would lead to criminal convictions, lawsuit victories, and speaking engagements about HOA reform. I had just wanted to get my property back and go to work. But sometimes life pushes you into being more than you thought you were capable of being. The lights were on in houses up and down the street, and I could see families inside having dinner, watching TV, living their lives in peace. That was what community was supposed to be about. Not rules and fines and citations, but people living their lives and supporting each other when times got tough. I went inside my warm house, made dinner, and settled in for the evening. Tomorrow I would go to work, come home, charge my car, and enjoy another ordinary day in a neighborhood that had finally learned what it meant to be a real community. And if anyone ever asked me whether fighting back had been worth it, I would point to all of this, everything we had built from the ashes of Patricia's reign of terror. And I would say yes, absolutely yes, it had been worth every moment. The battery charger incident, as it came to be known in Meadowbrook Hills lore, was more than just a story about stolen property. It was a story about standing up for yourself, about neighbors supporting each other, about the importance of accountability and the rule of law. It was a reminder that ordinary people have power when they choose to use it, and that bullies and tyrants can be defeated when communities come together. And every night when I plugged in my car and saw that charger mounted safely on my garage wall, I remembered that lesson and felt grateful for the journey that had brought me here, to this place of peace and community and justice.